Hello everyone and welcome to another Project Cars Online video, and we are back on Brands Hatch Indy Circuit in Ginetta Juniors. There's something about this track and these cars that I just really like, and I'm starting with the qualifying session because this video is a little bit longer than the others because it's quite an interesting one. It's explaining the first time that I've done a few things, and it was just a really interesting race, even just from from the qualifying all the way through to the end of the race. So this actually happened at the end of the stream that you saw the previous video from. We had a lot of problems in the previous video in terms of people hitting into other people and causing issues. So it was surprising that we got a race that was as clean as you're about to see in at the end of that stream. But I think having cars like this, where they are a little bit slower, they are easier to handle, not necessarily easier to get the maximum lap time out of them, but at least people aren't going to be spinning out all the time and causing issues. I think that does help. So yeah, it turned out to be quite good in that respect. Now obviously this is a very short lap. Brands Hatch Indy, it's only a sort of 55-second lap, even in these slow Ginetta Juniors. So in the qualifying session, the tyres are cold. The tyre wear is actually realistic on this session, so the tyres are cold. I'm just sort of taking a few laps to warm up the tyres and get into the process of it, get into the feel of it, learn how to drive these cars again, because it had been a while since episode 3, I think, which featured this track and these cars. So I'm just getting back into it, and I was one of the last people out of the pit lane for the qualifying session. Most of the people had got out straight away, and they were all setting their sort of best lap times now. And obviously when you do come out of the pit lane late, everybody else is kind of up to speed a lot quicker. They've got their tyres up to temperature, they're going quicker than you are at the same time because you're sort of further around the track, and it's kind of it's a benefit to be out as early as possible, but then you've got to deal with traffic and stuff like that, so it's a balancing act. I decided to go out late. I did my first flying lap there and I got it up into 3rd place, as you can see, but because everybody's doing their second laps now, which are going to be quicker because the tyres are all warmed up, I'm tumbling down the order. As you can see, I went from 4th to 5th, and then that will go down to P6, P7, P8. Everybody's crossing the line and setting a quicker lap time because they're getting into it. The tyres are getting up to temperature and all that kind of stuff. So in the very early stages of a qualifying session, you're always going to get that. You're never going to be able to just set one lap at the very start of a qualifying session and then that will be it, and you'll be in pole position for the whole way through. So as you can see, at this point I actually qualify with that second flying lap in 1st place, P1, and that surprised me so much that I ended up making a mess of the first corner and had to basically get out of the way of other people, because when you do make a mess in qualifying, you don't want to be ruining other people's laps. So you'll see me sort of look back, get out of the way, make sure I'm not holding anybody up. That's just general racing etiquette, that you just get out of the way if you've made a mess of it. So yeah, I actually got into P1 at that point, and that was the first time I'd ever been in P1, in 1st place in a qualifying session, especially racing against the good guys who I normally race with, who are in my crew. So throughout the course of the session, obviously my lap times did improve, as did everybody else's. That was only the 2nd lap, but I still managed to keep that 1st place, and when I realised I wasn't going to do as good in terms of lap time on this one, at the end of the session I just decided to come in the pits because I wasn't going to get another lap in. So that was the story of qualifying. I actually qualified in 1st place, and that's the first time I'd ever qualified in pole position. So this was a new experience for me, starting on pole position for the very start of the race. I'd never experienced that before, and I was just basically focusing on getting a decent start, even if it was reasonably okay. And that's what I do at this point. The start isn't too bad. I think it's Thel 46 on the inside of me. He is slightly there on the inside, you might have seen in the rear view mirror, but I do manage to get to the first corner first, and obviously I've got the better line for that. So we're seeing the replay view at this point, and the reason that I'm showing this replay view is because it kind of shows a little bit better what's happening behind and the battle that's going on behind. So in this first lap, as you saw a little bit there, a bit of oversteer, I'm just trying to settle back into the race. You know, it takes me a few laps to get settled in, and that's something that I need to sort out. Really, I'm never quite straight away on the pace on the first lap. It does take me a little bit too long to settle into a race, but because I managed to qualify on pole position and get into the first corner first, I'm able to, at this point, run my own race a little bit. The guys behind are all fighting with each other. Yes, I'm being challenged a little bit, but not too much, as we'll see going into the first corner. Really, it's the first corner that's causing me issues at the very start of the race. I'm not hooking that up very well, as you'll see here, you know. People are able to get a bit of a run on me. I'm just going a bit too tentative into that first corner on the first couple of laps. So that's why people are able to stay up with me. Now, the 4 guys here, that was a good overtake there. I'm not sure exactly who it was because the names aren't showing up, but it was a good overtake there up the inside. But the fact that these guys are all battling with each other behind, as you can see here, is just giving me a bit of breathing space. It's allowing me to get a bit of room to the guys behind me, and it's just giving me a bit of a buffer, if you like, in terms of being able to settle into the race a little bit easier. I can go at my own pace and try to settle into the race as quickly as I can, but I'm not having to worry about where everybody else is. Now again, coming up to the first corner again, I don't do that very well. I have been at the start of the race messing that first corner up, you know, way too wide there, and that allows I think it's Thel behind me again, a bit of a run on me going up to this corner, but he ends up making a mistake here, I think, and oversteering a little bit or something, and he ends up going off the track there. So behind me now is Hizen. Now the 4 guys who were, well, the 3 guys who were all battling, there was Calavera, Thel and Hizen, and they're all very, very quick guys. Now this is a position that I'm never really used to, you know, leading a race when someone is behind me. I think Hizen was about 1.5 seconds behind me at this point, and I've never really been comfortable in that situation, being out in front, because I'm not used to it. You know, it doesn't happen to me all that often, whether it's on a game like GTA, whether it's on a racing game like this, or even in my real life racing series. I think the feel that I have of the karts in the real life racing series makes it a little bit easier, but as you saw there, I managed to get that first corner hooked up that time, so I'd finally settled into the race at this point. But yeah, you know, being in this situation in the lead of a race isn't something that I'm necessarily as comfortable with as other situations. You know, I'm quite comfortable when it comes to having to defend. I'm quite comfortable when it comes to trying to catch people up and work my way through the pack and stuff like that. But leading a race, I've never really been that comfortable with it, and that's kind of what you're seeing here. The fact that it took me sort of a couple of laps to really get into the race, you know, hook up that first corner, start putting in competitive lap times, which obviously you can see the lap times in the top right. This is now from my perspective. But yeah, the gap between myself and Hizen behind stays pretty much consistent all the way through. It kind of fluctuates between 1.5 and 2 seconds throughout the entire race. So that's a lot of pressure, you know. He's not necessarily close enough to be having a go at me in terms of trying to overtake, but he's always there, you know. We're pretty much matching our lap times sector for sector. I think, you know, there were some sectors where I was better, some sectors where he was better, but ultimately the distance between us was staying pretty much consistent. So I was having to manage that, really. I was having to deal with that in a situation that I'm not really very comfortable, especially when I'm streaming as well, and I've got, you know, 100 people watching me on stream at the same time. It's too much pressure. I'm not very good in those situations, but I'm able to handle it well at the moment. You know, it's not going too bad. I'm not making any significant mistakes. My lap times are gradually improving, as you can see in the top right. You know, they are coming down, and then this lap that you're watching now, I think, is the best lap that I set throughout the course of the race. So I was getting quicker and quicker. I was settled into the race at this point, and I was comfortable. You know, I wasn't feeling too bad at this point. I was comfortable in the way that I was driving and the gap that I had to Hizen. Obviously the pressure was still there because I wasn't able to drive away from him, but the gap was there. The 2 second gap was there to give me that buffer, that to know that if I do have any mistakes or any issues, it's not going to be too bad. You know, I am able to to make a slight mistake into a corner, and he's not really going to be able to make that much of a gap on me. And as you can see, possibly from the mini map, we do have both of us quite a decent gap to the people behind, and we're actually starting to catch up to some back markers, obviously because the lap is so short. Now something that I've just noticed as I was watching this, that was actually my best lap of the race, but I was actually slower in the first two sectors. I didn't realise that at the time, so I actually could have had an even better lap if I'd actually hooked that up. I must have just hooked up the final sector really well. But yeah, I was actually slower in the first two sectors and still managed to get my best lap of the race. But yeah, we're coming up to lap a back marker at that point, and he does the right thing. He gets out of the way, as you saw there. If you ever are a back marker, that's what you should be doing. That's perfect, you know. And he gets out of the way here he goes on the outside to allow his up the inside. That's perfect. That's all you need to do is just you're at the back, you've made a mistake, just pull over to the side, let the leader go through, and that just makes it so much easier. And someone else is doing the same thing here, as you can see. He made a mistake, so he's kind of pulled off to the side and allowed me to go through. And that, when you're in the lead, that just makes it so much easier for you, because on a race like this, you know, you've already got the pressure. I've personally already got the pressure of his behind me. You know, I don't want to be held up behind traffic. I don't want to be making any mistakes. It gives him a chance to catch up and possibly overtake me for the win. So every time that you come up against a back marker, there is that little bit of panic. You know, is he going to let me through? Is he going to be a nice guy and not hold me up too much, or, you know, is he going to be a bit of a dick and then I'm going to lose a lot of time and Hisn could catch me up and end up challenging me more than he would have done if the back marker hadn't have been there. So that's all going through your mind in a race like this, and you're trying to race at the front. You're trying to put in the best lap times that you can and keep that first position, but you've got to be managing the traffic, especially on a race like this. It was a stream race, as I said. You know, you could have random people in there. I think there was a few randoms as well just in the lobby. It's something that you've got to deal with as you're going through a race like this on such a short track. So we've lapped, I think, 2 people at this point, or was it 3? I think it was 2. And I'm coming up to lap this guy. Now, obviously, as you get further up the field in terms of lapping people, the people who you're actually overtaking are going to be slightly quicker. That's just the nature of things, you know, because they're in a higher position. But as you can see, although he is quicker than the guys who had made a mistake and just pulled over to the side of the road, I'm still much quicker than him. You know, I'm able to get much better pace out of the corners. But Hisn is starting to catch me up a little bit, because my mind is off the ball, and I'm having to think about when I'm going to overtake this guy and possibly you know, move over and be compromised. Now, he's not letting me go past like the other guys did, and in actual fact, he decided to hit me and just completely ran me off the track. And that allows Hisn to come up on the outside, as you can see here. He ends up hitting into Hisn there. I take an opportunity to go right down the inside here. Hisn's right on the outside of me there. I defend the inside. You can see him in the rear view mirror. I defend the inside to keep the position, but he's right behind me. Then he ends up making a little bit of a mistake there, coming out of that corner, and I'm able to keep the position. And that was the last lap of the race as well. I forgot to mention that. That was intense at the time. You know, I was clenching, let's put it that way. And that was just some random guy. He was a random, he wasn't in the crew. Obviously, he just didn't want to be overtaken, so he just ran me off the road. Total scumbag. I don't know why he's playing a game like this, but if I almost lost it at that point. I didn't really do anything. I didn't have any form of response to that at all, really. I just got on with it and tried to get the win, and thankfully it all worked out, because it would have been so galling to have lost that race through something like that, someone just randomly deciding to take me out. So yeah, that was a pretty intense race, let's put it that way. You know, lights to flag victory, qualifying on pole position, and then managing to lead from the front as well. But it wasn't without issues, as you saw right at the end there. And I just thought it was quite an entertaining race. First time I've ever qualified on pole position, and it was good to get a win all the way, you know, lead all the way through and get that win. yeah, I really enjoy these cars as well, these Ginetta Juniors. They're a lot of fun to drive, and it's all about sort of keeping up that momentum. But it was a good race between me and Hizen as well, and I think he just oversteered a little bit to make that mistake. But then again, I didn't have traction control on either, so I was able to manage that a little bit better. So yeah, it was a fun race, and really interesting to have that sort of difference there. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video, guys. It was quite action-packed, and it was a little bit longer than previous Project Cars Online episodes. But yeah, leave all your comments down below. Let me know what you thought about this and the guy who decided to just completely ram me off the road. Thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it, and I'll see you next time.